What the? I'm coming to the cottage.
We're going to the cottage, bitches. Hello, my crumb whores. It's me, Phoebe Cakes, and you're watching In My Crumble Opinion, where I share my opinions on stuff. And today, the stuff in question is the best episode of television of all time. I was gonna say, like, of recent memory, but, like, I'm just gonna go ahead and say it, of all time. The best piece of television episode of all time. The best episode of all time. I'm just gonna say this for you Fujos. Okay? We're talking about Heated Rivalry. No Need to Bury the Lead. Episode number 5 rocked my world. Never experienced such electric television in my life. So I wrote like notes down about my thoughts on the episode. But I'm gonna be honest, this is gonna be all over the place, okay? I think it's actually more representative of how my mind works as an ADHD neurotypical person. So I'm just gonna be real that way. We're gonna be jumping around. I hope that's okay with you. I'll just briefly go over the hallmarks of what I believe make a really good television show episode specifically. Obviously, performances. A sense of thematic and narrative culmination. An expert use of music. Cinematic elements, things that it borrows from cinema. A qualitative change in the world. A television episode has to be satisfying and have a beginning, middle, and end, but also point toward the future because it's episodic, so something else is going to happen afterwards. Good episode writing respects that, but can also stand on its own as like a singular piece of cultural contribution, like episode 5 of Heated Rivalry. I just love it so much. I'm just like being very overcome with emotion. So before I start, I'm gonna get real with you. There's still Heated Rivalry deniers out there. And I do jokingly say that I am of a class of victims of mass psychosis, given how much I love this piece of media that's been gifted to us in such a dank, dark moment of time. But bitch, I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. And there's a lot of like, oh, you know, this is for gay people. There's like, no, you're wrong. Or like, oh, this is for women. No, you're wrong. It's like, this is literally for anyone that believes in hope and wants to witness beautiful role modeling for like how you should exist in the world and respond to the people you love. And I don't know, it's just like a really magical piece of media art that we're so seldom gifted. So get off your fucking high horse. You're not too good for smut. Okay, now that that's off my back, let's talk about cinematic prosody, cinematic craft. I stumbled upon this YouTube girly. She's a Fujo, just like me, but she's also like a cinematographer. And she breaks down Heated Rivalry and like the cinematic techniques that they do. And I think it's like really interesting and really good. You should definitely check her out. One of my favorite cinematic elements of this particular episode is the use of the dolly zoom. It's like really impactful when they're like watching the television and then the dolly and the camera like pushes in on their face and spins a little bit. And I think that's really smart direction. And obviously that's a choice that they made when they were shooting. It wasn't like anything they came up with in the editing room. Like Jacob like wanted that to happen. But he's also like translating, you know, the story as it's written from the book, because I believe like Ilya is described as feeling as if he's in a tornado. So like that idea of spinning is really expertly represented with the camera work. And that's just like one of the many elements of, you know, its cinematic approach that I really appreciated. Another one is the idea of being in an adversarial relationship, being rivals. Shane and Ilya are always face to face because they're fighting with each other, you know? So they're face to face, in the first episode, they have that intense moment, like when they're playing the when they're in the commercial and they're face to face. You know, well, it's actually kind of comedic, but like that's how the relationship is. And in this episode, so many of the scenes are blocked with them looking in the same direction. You know, so like when they're at the bar and they finally reunite after, you know, months and years not seeing each other. They're seated at the bar facing the same direction. And then the scene when they're like watching the sunset together, they're both facing the sunset and the sun is just like sandwiched between them. And they're like touching thumbs, I think is like obviously a very beautiful and impactful tableau. But it also like reinforces the idea that they're kind of facing the same direction and that they're no longer adversaries but partners. And I really love the way in which the blocking reinforces that change in the relationship. Let's talk about the use of music. Obviously, the Wolf Parade song was the needle drop of the century. It's just... The way in which music is used in this show is so smart because, okay, the way Emerald Fennell used music in Saltburn was just so, like, ham-fisted. Like, what? Like, there was, like, a disconnection between the songs and what was going on in the story. Like, okay, we get it. You're in, like, the early aughts, like, and you're playing music from the early aughts, but you're not really, like, kind of telling a story with the music. And here, the Wolf Parade song, again, places us in a place in time, you know. Obviously, if you're like a late millennial that was into alternative indie rock, indie sleaze, the song was hitting. You know, that stomp, like, obviously proto stomp clap. I'm not going to say it's stomp clap, hey, but, you know, it's giving that boom, boom, anthemic vibe. So, very powerful. So, not only does it place us in time, but it also kind of imparts a feeling, you know, obviously. But not only does it impart a feeling with the music itself, but, like, lyrically, oh, bitch. Like, the callback to Sunshine, which Kip's friend says to Scott Hunter that he also deserves sunshine. That her friend, but also you, deserve sunshine. And then that song, on repeat, says, give me your eyes, I need sunshine. But it's also a song about taking somebody to a place where you're free of judgment and responsibility to these external repressive apparatus. The song is just like such a good use of the song. You know what I mean? Like, it's like we used every single part of that song to like help tell the story. And to contrast it to, yet again, another example from I Love LA, the needle drop in the I Love LA finale, like, made no sense. Like, why linger, you know, when they're running to this dinner,
Dreams.
this, like, was it Dreams? Yeah. Yeah, Dreams? Yeah. I don't get it. There was no connection for me, mama. It felt unearned and kind of just came out of nowhere. The way that it grows and everything's working in concert. You know, the song, you know, the camera work.
Those first notes of the Wolf Parade song,
yeah,
it sounds like, and I thought it was, until we listened to the song later, I thought it was like hockey game soundboard effects. I thought they were like doing like...
Oh, yeah. The electronic elements of the song feel harmonious with where they are as well. It's like, that song didn't seem like it came out of nowhere. That song felt like it arose from the environment in which it was existing in. You know, does that make any sense? Oh, bitch, you know, this actually brings me to another thing. Buckle in. We're going to talk about dialectical materialism, okay? A lot of people like to talk about why that this show is like so hopeful. That it's hopeful. This is a hopeful show. That there's joy in this show. I'm wary of using the word joy because I think Kamala Harris like kind of ruined it for us, but I'll use it here. You know, it's a joyful, hopeful piece of media, and I'm trying to like think about like what is it that is so hopeful about it. There's this yearning and this like connection that we get through the yearning, and it's just like you see a light at the end of the tunnel. Obviously, yeah, that's that's hope, right? But I also think like it speaks to the idea that within us are contradictions, and within the world there are contradictions. And in philosophy, they call that a dialectical relationship or way of looking. So like things will always become its opposite. Strangers will become friends. Hatred can become love. What is your present will become a memory, your past. So things are always in flux, and things are always moving toward its opposite or becoming its opposite. And those contradictions are inherent to how we experience life and exist in the world. And it's just beautiful to like know that whatever rivalry they have is obviously going to become love. Whatever strangeness they have to each other is going to become intimately, closer and closer. Whatever shame that they have, they're going to find, pride and connection. So it's just like, I think that's happening. We're getting to experience the dialectical reality of nature, And also within this idea of like dialectical materialism is the idea of like qualitative change and quantitative change. If you think of like, like it's fall, and then like a tree loses its leaf, and it loses one leaf at a time. Those are like quantitative changes, each leaf is falling down. But soon, the tree is going to be completely bare, and it's going to represent that it is fall. And that is a qualitative change. Like, we've now moved from summer to fall. In that example, it's just like every time there's a meet cute, every time there's a connection between Ilya and Shane, every time they meet each other, every time they ruminate on each other's encounters, they get closer and closer to like changing their world because of these iterative connections that they have with one another. They can ultimately find love with one another, and that's very, beautiful to witness. But not only is there this show extorting or employing that idea of quantitative change that could lead to qualitative change, they also like just hit us in the face with a qualitative change. When Scott Hunter kisses Kip in front of everybody, dispossessed of like whatever shame and just like overcome with the need to be with him again, or get down here, I'm just like, oh my god. So we get both kinds of change. You get both kinds of like representations of hope, It's just like, it's just beautiful. Is there anything else I want to say about philosophy? Let's talk about motifs a little bit. Jump back into literature, the intersection of literature and philosophy. We're talking about qualitative change. The idea of like ice and sunshine. So ice and sunshine. They're hockey players. They're on ice. Ice is hard, Ice is cold. And then what can change ice? Quantitative change. Things get softer. Heat rises. The temperature rises. And what happens when the temperature rises? The ice starts to melt. And I think we're also getting a sense of melting. We have these like, symbols, the ice that they're playing on. And then what can cause the temperature to rise? The sunshine. So it's just like this emergence of like sunshine as this like force, a symbol for love, something that opportunes love or creates love, or it's just like smart, and it's not like fire and ice, but it's more like ice as this thing that can slowly change, not necessarily also its opposite, So again, there's these contradictions that exist within the characters of the show and within the show. And it's just like the idea that like ice and sunshine are these, symbols, I think is also very powerfully used in this episode. Obviously they're like looking at the sun in that scene prior to them meeting in the hotel room where Shane, comes out to Ilya. It's just so smart. So smart. And one more thing about Sunshine, the cottage episode, it's just like there's just so much light in that episode, and that sure, you know, maybe this is just how Canada looks. It's just, like, beautiful. But there's, like, glass everywhere in the cottage and just, like, lets so much light in. I think the smart use of location for the cottage was pretty genius, you know, because it is an episode about letting the light in. And so many of their encounters were always, like, in the dark and at night. And them being able to relate in this, like, wide open space, you know, just kind of symbolically rich as well. Another thing this show does really, really well, and is actually absent from this episode, is sex. It's a lot of people's entry point into the show, it being smut and it being sexy and horny. I mean, I know that's why I started watching the show. It's like, oh, there's this horny show. It's like, oh, I want to see it. But the show keenly acknowledges that sex can be used not only as a titillating feature of media, but also just like a feature of storytelling. Like, things happen in the sex and things happen because of the sex. I think often in, I don't know, cis hetero narratives, you know, it's just like you relate to get to the sex, and the sex is the goal. But here, they're having sex because that is the relating. Like, and I think that's something that, like, gay men and, like, women understand, that sex is a form of relation, not the goal of relating. And I think that's very interesting and very good. I'm going to parrot Glenn Weldon, who is one of the hosts of Pop Culture Happy Hour on NPR. Shows like Boots and Overcompensating belong to the kind of queer shows that believe that characterization ends at the bedroom door. And we see that a lot. A lot of cutaways, they don't show sex. We learned that maybe these characters do or do not have sex. Sure, maybe not, maybe so. We don't learn how they have sex. And that's what the show, Heated Rivalry, is all about. How they deal with intimacy and vulnerability and authority. When do they cede control and when do they take control? How do they deal with humor? Because sex can be very funny. Can they laugh at themselves? And I just really feel like he's acknowledging that, you know, yeah, sex is part of the storytelling in an integral way to, like, build character and understand character and get insights into, you know, their psyche and how they interact. Another thing I want to point out about the show is that Jacob Tierney, the showrunner, really respected the source material. So he regarded the fandom in such a way that not only did it speak to and respect the feelings of the readers who already loved Heated Rivalry, the book written by Rachel Reed, but was able to translate that onto media, onto television media, and even get a bigger audience and find more people. And I think a lot of adaptations, you know, there's some hubris in, like, directorial authority, you know, that want to diverge or disrespect the source material. And it doesn't always work out in their favor. So, shout out in the comments if you have any, if you know any directors like that. Emerald Fennel. I am gonna watch that movie, Wuthering Heights, but spit on the Bronte's grave. It might be well done. Okay, who knows? Okay, to be seen. What I also really love about this episode is that there was not a scene that didn't have an integral impact on successive scenes. Everything that happened had a purpose, and the following scene couldn't have happened without that previous scene. And what I mean is that sometimes when you watch things, it's just like a series of things happening. And maybe it'll culminate into something, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes there's just like scenes that are filler. And this episode literally had no filler scenes. So, for instance, like the scene opens and Rose basically holds Shane's hand in coming out. And it's kind of a beautifully acted scene. We look for Sophie Nélisse, who plays baby Melanie Linsky in Yellow Jacket. The Canadian excellency in this show. That scene, without her leading Shane to come out and Shane finding peace with who he is, or starting to find peace with who he is, we wouldn't have gotten the successive scene where Shane walks into the bar in Tampa and he has a sense of power about him and a sense of ease about him. And if we didn't get that scene where he's able to assume some sort of like magnetism and strength to like then come into the hotel room later to meet Ilya, and then him be vulnerable with Ilya and Ilya be receptive, it's just like every single scene could not have existed before the scene prior to it. And everything that happened in that previous scene informed and strengthened what happened in its successive scene. I just think like in terms of like writing something that has no filler and everything having a sense of intention is very rare to see in television. Now let's just talk about these scenes. The acting in it is like phenomenal. The way in which Shane listens. I think acting for someone that isn't an actor or someone that isn't like attuned to like looking at acting performances, you know, we'll have this conception that like acting's all about speaking and acting's all about, you know, presenting or projecting, or acting is all about action. Acting is also really, really keenly tied to the practice of listening and reacting. And being authentic and picking up impulses. And I think something very special that Shane does as an actor is his ability to listen. The way he's just, his big brown eyes well up while Rose is speaking to him is just like a very special. So I just want to say, Shane, I want to give Hudson Williams his flowers there. Also about this scene, when Rose Landry is like, "Oh, so have you ever been with a man?" And then he starts having flashbacks of him and Ilya together. What in the Citizen Kane is going on here? I mean, like, that is cinema, baby. That is cinema. It's making it a good episode. Number 1 episode is giving cinema. What I really like about the show in general, and this isn't like specific to the episode, but I think is an integral part of this particular episode, is that it recontextualizes the relationship of like women and gay men, and also just women in general. You know, I think in rom-coms or in romances, women are almost always depicted as unwise or foolish. You know, they stumble into love because they're like too strong-headed or they're too unaware. And you see this trope reenacted over and over again. And even though this isn't necessarily like a marriage plot for a man and a woman, the women here are powerful. They're wise. And, you know, they play an integral part in helping the main characters find peace and discover things about themselves. So I just like that. The thing that it also does is that whenever there's gay men in media, they're like the gay best friend, and they assist, you know, the women and men in the show or the movie to like get together. You know, they're just like tools of the heterosexual imperative. And here, it's subverted, and I also like that. And just to like give, you know, another contrasting example, you know, I Love LA is like Jordan Firstman's character in their final episode, you know, season finale, is like he's there to like help, you know, her boyfriend Josh Hutcherson, you know, kind of get clarity and reconnect with Rachel Sennett. So, you know, like the trope is alive and well, but Heated Rivalry didn't have time for it. So I kind of like that. One thing I failed to mention in the previous video about Heated Rivalry as well is the aspect of yaoi or boy love, the MSM romantic genre. One of the reasons why women kind of relate to it or why it resonates with them, it really sets up kind of a sense of love without these power dynamics that the relations between men and women have within patriarchy. There's an symmetry and equitability between, you know, Shane and Ilya that is dispossessed of what sometimes exists between men and women, you know, that power dynamic. So being able to regard and look at examples of love without that asymmetry, I think is, you know, one of the reasons why women have connected to this material so much. There's a couple of things that I just kind of forgot to address, and I just wanted to like bring up. I think looking at Heated Rivalry as a genre piece is also kind of an important thing. I think people look at genre as a way to like demean art or to hierarchize art in a certain way. It's like it's not high, it's not important, but genre is a reflective media. So like just like how we look at horror and what horror can say about, you know, society or about mental health or whatever, like genre, the genre of romance and the genre of smut could really be like a reflective tool. And what does Heated Rivalry reflect in society right now? Like, why are we responding so positively to it overwhelmingly? Why is it such a cultural moment? And I think hopefulness is definitely a big part of that. And also queerness and acceptance is a big part of that. You know, again, I am like kind of jaded by the term joy, because I think the term joy has been kind of weaponized lately as like a propagandistic tool, but it is joyful. There's joy in the show. It makes me feel happy. It makes me feel hopeful. It makes me feel joy. So I just want to say, like, genre's it, and I have a show called Genre, so that's that. Another thing I want to say is, like, I just want to address some of the criticism of the final episode. We talked about it a little bit. You know, Cottage was a really sweet coda to the entire season. And in some ways, the penultimate episode, episode 5, was the culmination and the climax of the season. Maybe like a false finale. So The Cottage as a singular episode was like very sweet and very important. And I just like love being in that world and continuing that relationship, getting to see the relationship and continuing my relationship to these characters in The Cottage. I just want to address the controversy. I think some people had some knee-jerk reactions, myself included, when Ilya decided to give Shane a blowjob while he was on the phone. And I think people have feelings about that because it appears that Shane kind of put up a boundary and Ilya had transgressed it. And I kind of thought that was a little icky and weird in the moment as well. But it made me reflect on some of the hallmarks of the genre of romance itself as well. And there's this concept of like safe danger that is a feature of yaoi and porn and romance, and this idea that you can enact things that might seem dangerous or traumatizing or triggering in a safe way, and that exercise of kind of like reenactment could be healing or cathartic or erotic. And I think that was maybe, you know, a representation or you know, that moment was participatory in that safe danger. And they're safe because, again, thinking about the symmetry of the two guys, is like Shane's never in any real danger with Ilya. They're like evenly matched. So I think that valence of like, you know, they're equal, and it was just like the theater of danger or the theater of transgression, and that in itself was part of the erotic playfulness of that scene, and I thought it was actually cute in the end. So, you know, I think the genre of romance is a very sticky one, and there's a lot to criticize and chew on and reckon with it, but there's features of it that are very complicated and rich and interesting, and, you know, no kink shaming here, so work. Bitch, I told you I'm going to be jumping around. Okay, so going back to, like, structure, just in terms of, like, scene building again, a little bit of, like, plotting out the narrative for this particular episode, I think it was very smart of Rachel Reed to have the plot point of, like, Shane getting injured in that game. Not only does it create a moment for Ilya to kind of, like, wake up and understand how much he loves Shane, and them having that sweet moment in the recovery room when Shane is hopped up on painkillers and asks Ilya to go to the cottage. But the injury also is really smartly placed because it opportunes Scott Hunter to do really well in the hockey series, because like Shane's team lost their center, and Ilya is probably distracted because his boyfriend's hurt. So I think it like really smartly kind of bolsters the realities of that world that they're living in, that Scott Hunter can do so well that season. So I thought it was kind of smart and kind of cute, and I see what you're doing. And I just want to say, like, I'm not above being manipulated. Okay, I'm not gonna say that like the dialogue was high literature, because I think that would be disingenuous, but I do think the dialogue did what needed to be done. You know what I mean? Like, I understand this is the romance genre, and I'm not looking for like fucking Shakespeare here, and I do want to be manipulated. She would have loved you. Oh my god. She would have loved you. Okay. When Ilya's boyfriend? Boyfriend? I'm your boyfriend? Okay? Don't marry her. Oh my god. It's just like, I don't care. Manipulate me. But also, cinema. Bitch, when they were having that conversation about Svetlana and about like marrying her, not marrying her, wanting to stay in the country, she could help me do that, and they're having this like, conventionally blocked conversation, And then at the end of the conversation, they cut to the wide, and their toes were touching the whole fucking time. The toes? Oh, the cut to the wide to see the toes. Oh my god, this is filmmaking. It's like Scorsese. Oh my god. Oh, and people will say that this is like acceptance porn, and obviously it is. It's like some people actually do have relationships with their parents like that, but it's also just like, why not represent that? Why not represent acceptance? There's so much conflict in our lives, and to be able to like witness love, unconditional love, I think is real and also beautiful and necessary and powerful. I just got home from a gig, got all this stuff off, but I did want to hop back on and just kind of say something that I forgot to say that I just really wanted to share. I just wanted to just really say, like, I think we get bombarded with a lot of coming out narratives, and they're all very, like, sweet, the Love Simon of it all, or Heartstopper, or whatever, but I think there is something really uniquely special about what episode 5 of Heated Rivalry did for me as a queer man, as a gay boy, and something that I haven't really connected with for a very, very long time. I came out a very, very long time ago. I came out in 2001. What is the year right now? How many years ago is that?
Well, it's 2026 as the time.
So
of the
25
release.
A quarter century.
25 years ago, a quarter of a century. So I've been really disconnected to like what that felt like. What did it feel like to come out? And there's this sensation of both fear and liberation that I went through, that I've been disconnected from. That was formative, a big qualitative change for me. And just like watching that episode, I got to reconnect with that sensation. And I don't know, I think it just reset everything for me. And I just feel so free and happy, and I get to like feel that again. That hope. Yeah, that. Experiencing culture and experiencing art and existing in the world as like a gay person, it's like culture is an iterative practice. You're always being shown things over and over and over again, and it really kind of like programs you in a particular way. And something that you should know about queer media is that you've really been programmed to think that someone's gonna die, that something bad was going to happen. And we got through this whole fucking season, and nothing bad happened. We didn't have to bury any of our gays. And that is revolutionary, and that is something to be celebrated. And because, we deserve to see ourselves flourish. So, I needed to say that. What I also really liked about the interaction between Shane and his mom is that you really see their sameness, you know? Like, Shane's always, like, coming up with business ideas throughout the episode, and then immediately after their conversation, the mom's like, I got these ideas, we gotta get Speedo on the phone, you know? I'm just like, cut from the same cloth. It's really beautiful, but they also, like, I think the casting was excellent. They really look alike. And let's give it up for casting directors, okay? Casting directors, as far as I'm aware, is, you know, mainly done by women. So much the venture of filmmaking is helmed and dominated by men. There are a couple of, like, professions within filmmaking and television making that is primarily run by women, and that's casting, and that's editing. And I just want to shout out the casting directors, Jenny Lewis and Sarah Kay work. And then I also want to shout out the editor, Veronique Barbe, okay? That is a hella Canadian name, Veronique Barbe. But y'all ate that. This note actually comes from Angel Food Cakes, my co-producer over here. His note was about the use of language in the episode. Often in Netflixy shows or popular television shows or even in movies, when there's a foreign-born character or whenever there's scenes of people of a specific region, they're depicted as, like, speaking English, even though they're not, you know, and it's not believable. So what we love is that the use of Russian really gives, you know, the work a sense of authenticity. And I also want to say that Connor Story, oh my gosh, what a little genius, what a little polyglot. I love you so much. What he is able to do is nothing short of virtuosic. So let's just talk about Ilya's monologue. If you know me, I love irony, okay? I think Ilya's monologue was so great. I thought it was acted beautifully. The accent and language work that, you know, the actor Connor Story had to put in for this was immense. I'll pull up a quote. There's a quote from the dialect coach that says, like, you know, regarding their performance, like, they were in awe, you know. It's just like, it was so masterful, it was so powerful and so beautiful. And having that multi-page monologue delivered so powerfully, I also like the irony of that. I don't think these characters have ever been more close, but they're actually, like, on different continents. They've never been more intimate, but they're actually on the phone. You know, so that contrast of connection, but, like, physical distance synthesizes something within me, like, watching that. It was just like, it felt very powerful. But there's other, again, we're talking about dialecticals, you know, these contradictions, these opposites that exist between us. They're also speaking different languages. You know, Shane's like, why don't you tell me in Russian? And as far as we know, Shane doesn't know Russian. But there's a way in which Shane listens that elicits another, like, sense of irony. Is like, oh, actually, Shane is either understanding on an emotional level the pain and need for catharsis and connection that Ilya is needing, you know, in his monologue. Or there's this other, maybe, you know, other sense of irony is that, like, maybe Shane's been, like, learning Russian or has picked up enough Russian to, like, actually kind of understand what Ilya is saying, and he's just there to receive it and without judgment. And I'm just like the acting and the speaking and then, like, the listening and the accepting. It's just like, I've never seen a more perfect scene. And I think it was, like, the heart of the episode in some ways. And I'm like getting, like, overcome with emotion, like, thinking about it, because it's just like it ends with, like, well, you know, teach me something in Russian, you know, like, what do you want me to say? It was like, I wish you were here. And so, like, at that point, like, that's when the languages converge, you know, through translation. And that's also, like, when, you know, it's also symbolic of them, you know, reaching each other. Oh. And it's just like, you would think that that would be enough for like an episode of television, but they like give us the thing with Scott and Kip at the end. And, you know, I talked about earlier how they're always like, they're always adversarial, facing different directions, you know, or facing toward each other. And then in this episode, they really shift and they're facing the same direction. And that final scene with Scott and Kip, you know, on the ice rink, they're miles apart, but they're actually also still looking in the same direction. They're looking at the same thing. So the idea of the gaze, or the idea of looking, is always just being reinforced, you know, with the way that the show is directed. And that's all I gotta say. You know, I'm really sorry that this was a hot mess. Okay, I have ADHD, and I just had too many notes. They're all over the place, but I really wanted to get this video out. There's so much more that I could talk about, you know, just like, you know, all the one-ers that they do. Like, the actors had to have so much chemistry and had to be so good because so much of the scenes are uncut, you know, that it's one continuous take that happens in the cottage a lot. Like, when they first get to the cottage, it's a one long continuous take from the kitchen and when they get to the couch. And, I didn't even talk about, like, the, you know, other aspects of the blocking. When Ilya finally says to Shane what's going on with his father, and he's crying, but, like, Shane gets on top of Ilya and hugs him. So he's, like, hugging him from being, like, and comforting him when he's, like, straddling him. And it's like, that is queer relationality, and I don't know if you know that, but it's just, like, you don't get that in, like, conventional relationships. So there's just, like, oh my god, there's just so much to unpack here. I could, but I'm gonna stop here. I'm gonna stop. There's enough to chew on. I will revisit this at some point, but I just want to say, for you Heated Rivalry fans out there, and you Fujos, you Shane and Ilya Fujos, that you're not alone, that you're seen, that this is what we deserve, and I'll see you in 2027. I'm actually gonna cryogenically freeze myself until season 2 comes out. So it's the last you'll hear of me. I'm just kidding. Please like, subscribe, share this video if you love Heated Rivalry. If I missed anything, which I probably did because I'm stupid, just put it down in the comments. Interact. Thank you.
What the? I'm coming to the cottage.
We're going to the cottage, bitches. Okay, one more thing. It's like, not only can you, like, melt ice, but you could, like, break ice, you know? We think about, like, breaking the glass ceiling, which is, like, kind of what he did. And what does glass look like? Looks like ice, you know? He broke the ice ceiling. Ugh. Qualitative change. We did that. Okay, I gotta go. Bye.